Welcome to the Mindcraft podcast. My name is Dr. Kimberly Quinn, and I am here with the amazing Dr. Lindsey Godwin and the also amazing Miriam Novotny, co-authors of Ditch the Ditty, their new book, which we're going to hear all about in this podcast, which is about doing what matters instead of doing it all. And I am so excited. So we've got Lindsey as a professor, now author, and Miriam as a leadership coach, now author. And I am so excited to hear what these two, let's just call them the dynamic duo, have to say about Ditch the Ditty. Welcome, Lindsey and Miriam, to the Minecraft podcast.
Thank you, Kim. We're so excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Kim. This is great.
I am beyond excited. I've had Lindsey before, and now I've gotten to know Miriam a little bit off camera here, and I'm super stoked. So, how about we have Miriam start us, or was it Lindsey? I think Lindsey is starting us off with, and I'm kind of curious about this myself. What is a ditty?
Right? I mean, that is the question, Kim. What is a ditty and why should we ditch them? I mean, it makes you want to read the book, doesn't it? So, but let's start with, yes, a ditty. I know. So some people know a ditty, will tell the story for where it came from, but a ditty, as you will find out from the book, is something that is an unwanted and unnecessary task, ask, or even social obligation that we feel that we have. So both of those words are very important: unwanted and unnecessary. So these are ditties that we have lovingly come to call them ditties because, Kim, believe it or not, there was actually a real life story behind the ditty and where this came from. So once upon a time, Miriam and I can take you back to a time when she and I and our third co-author, so there's a third amazing co-author with us, Molly McGuigan, were a part of leading a big event, a big multi-year-long project that we were leading. And a lot of organization, right? We are three women sort of organizing, leading things. And there was sort of a conference, there's speakers, there's things happening. Molly and I might have been backstage getting ready one of the speakers was getting ready to go up on the stage. And he turned to Molly and literally handed her, a little ditty bag. So a ditty bag, historically, right, is like the little travel bag that people have, that like carries all your stuff in it. And he handed her this bag and he said, "Here, it has my life in it. Hold it for me." And so, like, Molly didn't have other things to do. Like, Molly is running this event, right? There are like 10 other people backstage that could have held his little ditty bag. There was a table where he could have set it down. Anyway, Molly, being the polite, hopeful people pleaser that she was, took his bag, put all of the other things that she was busy doing sort of away. And believe it or not, we weren't smart enough at the time to ditch that ditty, but we did take a picture of it. So we do have a picture of Ground Zero with this ditty bag. It might be in the book, but with, faces.
Can I show it?
Can you show it?
Yeah,
Show the picture.
absolutely.
So here is the original
Wow.
ditty story, right? So there's that bag. And so here we have this picture. And then he comes back, after he does his thing on stage and like takes the bag back without even saying thank you to her. And so later that night, we grab our colleague Miriam here. So Molly and I grab Miriam, and we sort of like shared with this picture. And she's like, "Why did you hold his stupid ditty bag for him?" And so it became this like it became this moment for us, this like lightning bolt moment, sort of like in the Matrix, right? Where you have the blue pill and the red pill and you have a choice of like seeing things. We realized that this little ditty bag was so much more than a ditty bag. It was a metaphor for us of all of the things that is, especially as women, that we hold for other people that we don't have to or don't want to. Back to that, Molly didn't need to or have to hold that. But again, we got really curious about diving into in our own lives, right? Looking at us as we are professional, successful women by any measure. And yet here we are, like still literally picking up and holding ditty bags for other people, and how much energy that is expended in things. And so we got really curious about our own experience, but also diving into the research around gender socialization, around, why, people pleasing, all of these different things. And we started also really then interviewing and talking to women around the world. And of course, this is not a unique to us experience. And so we really have again lovingly gone back to that original ditty story as this sort of this just watershed moment for us in terms of awareness, and a curious conversation and a learning journey that we've been on together, and now launching with our book about why do we pick up ditties, how do we ditch them, how can we show up sort of in our more authentic selves and really be mindful of the energy and the things that we are saying no to, but also what we're saying yes to, so that we really are putting our energy toward what matters. So, Miriam, what have I left off in our, our
I still love that story. It never gets old.
It's a
So
great
I don't think you really,
story.
yeah, it's a wonderful story. I think, it's really beyond, I think what's an interesting thing about this, particularly as this book is launched and we continue to engage in conversations with other women, is just at this point in time where we are in our own, in the context of the larger world, there's just a higher level of stress. The pace of change is really, at the speed of light. And so really thinking about as a woman and women who are in leadership positions, that place of like having to get really intentional about how you're spending your time, what you're
Yes.
saying yes to, what you're saying no to really does matter. Because believe it or not, we have to remind ourselves there are only 24 hours in the day. And, this bit of like, well, how can I begin to step back and really orient around, well, what does matter? It's an interesting question that's not quite easily available for women, or people in general, but women in particular, to go, oh my God, I haven't even taken the time to figure that out. And when in a leadership position, strategies are having to change on a dime. So anything you're saying no to is really saying what you're saying yes to. So it's permission and prioritization, I would say. I don't know, Lindsay, how's that land?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah,
think, Kim? What's
yeah. What do you
sparking
think?
for you?
You want to know where my mind went to, because my fast mind is like all over the place. It went to yes to business, Yahoo. So glad you wrote the book. Then, I just turned a sensational 60. So I'm thinking of the conditioning all the way up through, because we have
Yeah.
five amazing young adults. I have a fantastic husband, and our sons and my husband are all kind of feminists and everything. And still, as a mother, there was just all these there's all the expectations when you have an event, when you have when it's the holidays, in addition to the business part. So then the woman in business has gets that on the family end, gets that on the business end, and gets it basically 360 end.
Right.
That's what just went through my
Yeah,
mind, like just perpetually
You're
juggling.
spot on. You're spot on, Kim. And that's really, as we said, we dove in, again, unpacking our own experiences, but really diving into the research and the statistics on all of that. That, like, again, you're not alone in that, Kim. There's a reason why that, right? We dive into the gender socialization, exactly like the messages, the reinforcement that both, boys and girls get sort of growing up, and that women, it sort of leads us, especially as women, to be what persistent pleasers, right? People pleasers. How are we're reinforced from at home, and that carries on into work, sort of to please, to be the perfect pearl. We talk about being that, the sort of, my value comes from me doing it right, doing it all. And then of course the self-doubt, right? We talk about the self-doubting dame that we all sort of hold in ourselves, and that there's often this sense of like, I need to prove that I can do it. But you're right. There's sort of, women are rewarded for saying yes. In fact, there's research on women are punished or sort of seen more negatively, especially in the workplace, when they do say no to things, even like non-promotable tasks, right? So we often, the invisible labor that women do, not just at home, but in the office, really takes a toll. And there's often a sense that you can't say no to those things.
Yeah, and you know what this brings me to? I just one of my clients I was working with recently out of state. The whole idea of emotional professionalism came up, and
Mm-hmm.
the team of leaders was primarily female, and it's interesting how much came up about wanting to nurture feelings and staff things in meetings, and how that's such a touchy sticky thing. We're conditioned to, we want to, really shouldn't be doing that in the meeting, but it's just at a certain level. Obviously if it's something different, but it was a
Mm-hmm.
kind of quite a conversation with professional
Mm-hmm.
women, kind of discussing this actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think that's so powerful. There is, and I think particularly during COVID, it became even more accentuated. Is that the role that women played in like carrying that emotional labor of the team? I think it was always there, but I think the weight of it became just unbearable for some. And I think it really did make people become a little bit more aware of like, well, God, not only am I doing my job and all the other tasks and asks that are before me, I'm also doing a lot of the heavy lift, the unseen labor on a daily basis. And so we're seeing these high rates of burnout. I mean, and I
Oh,
think that's a big part of
definitely.
our right, and so I think it's a big part of our work is like, well, how do we begin to step back from that, and where do we find agency, and seeing where we can and can say no, and then in doing so, bring more energy into our yes. I think that's what's been such an interesting part of our work is like really in the process of looking at decisions, we created what we call a decision tree, and
Right,
three
right, right.
quarters of that tree is dedicated to the yes. And a lot of what the people we work with have said is like, it's been great to, say no, but what I've really come to love is that I'm really clear why I'm saying yes. And
Oh, I
so
love
my
that.
energy and dedication to the yes is so much more powerful.
Miriam, I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I
Mm,
really love that because it's like it's an empowered yes. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
especially as a leader, women obviously have such a challenge anyway in business being a leader, and to have her amp up her voice to an empowered, enlightened yes, I think is fantastic
Yeah, definitely.
and more
And
clear.
that's some Yeah, well, and that's just it, Kim. The clarity is something that, again, for us, that was a part of our journey of getting clear. Again, diving into the positive psychology, the research on all of the tools, and that's a big piece of it for us. As we talk about what are ditties and why ditch them, we talk
Hmm.
about the different disguises that ditties come
Right, right.
in our life. We can talk about that. But it also, we spend a lot of time then, as Miriam said, the first question in the decision tree is this something I want to do? And that seems like such a simple question, but actually for us, and especially as women who, again, have been reinforced to do things for other people, sometimes we blend what we think we want with what we should want with what will make you happy. And so
Hmm.
exactly, Kim, that clarity of what is important to me, and that's a whole section in the book. We talk about getting essential about our essentials, and so really getting clearer so that exactly we have that empowered clarity to be like, this is important to me and this is why I'm saying yes to this or no to that. And recognizing too that that is not a static thing, that our essentials are something
Right.
that as our life evolves, just as I love your work, it's always reminding us that is like, it's not a one and done. It's not like, oh, I've spent 5 minutes thinking about what's important to me. It's a
Mm,
continual journey, and a continual conversation with ourselves, as life changes, as family changes, as
Right.
health changes, that but we're constantly we talk about that, and again get into some evidence-based tools and practices in the book to again, how often do we pause to give ourselves even 5 minutes to be like, no, what is important to me? Not what should I care about? What should I, but really what is at my core, what is important to me. So as Miriam said, I can bring that into my decision making in a very clear and empowered way.
I think that is so incredibly important, Lindsay, because I'm sitting here thinking my generation, and here I am, 2 master's degree, a doctorate, and all the rest, and I'm still like it's not always cerebral.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's this well, in a way it is because it's unconscious conditioning. Because I think I was probably halfway or 2/3 through my 30s when I realized I was doing a lot of. I'm thinking of the holidays mostly, which are wonderful, but I'm like, whoa, there are lots more, capable, able people who could be doing setting the table or even things like that. Because I think a lot of this is being driven by societal conditioning that's in the vault. So in order to
It's true.
clear it, we have to bring it to awareness first, right?
Right.
So how
Well,
do
and
we
I think that's, go
go
ahead.
ahead?
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, and feel free, Miriam, if you want to finish that thought, if it doesn't gel with this, because the unconscious thing, what's in the vault, and how we're conditioned by society, meaning even wonderful, meaning, loving family members who are also used to it,
Right.
because that's how they were conditioned, right? It's just like a cycle. And also the media, the movies, the whole thing, kind of feeding this overcommitment that we as women sort of buy into passively, in the beginning, right? Um, how how do women, how do we as women break free from that? Is my big question.
Well, I think you did such a nice job already alluding to it. I mean, I think that the big part of this is the beginning of like starting to scale your awareness of like that it is, we have habits, right? And as we move along, these habits at some point maybe start no longer really serve the greater good, the good that we do or the greater good. And so I think it's that opportunity to step back. I think that this work is intended to be a light entry ramp into a rather serious conversation. So I think there is just in creating a new vocabulary around this that is a little bit more accessible, takes away some of the mantles of shame. Like, that we often feel a lot of guilt because we're not doing things perfectly, even ditching ditties perfectly. We didn't want people to
Yes,
feel that
yes.
way. So we really wanted to create something like, okay, this happens, and it not only it happens to all of us. And I think there is something in building this community of conversation in these spaces where women can share, just as you talked about in this leadership meeting, share these things that happen on a regular basis in both personal and professional lives. That has become a really profound noticing for us. It's just like, oh my God, I'm not alone. And you know what? I am tired. And as much as I say I want to be taking care of my well-being, I promise you it is at the bottom of the list
Oh,
because I've said
totally.
yes to everything else, right? And so it just, and I would say what's been really powerful for the three of us, and Lindsay, feel free to chime in, is that having people like your ditty divas around you, women who can like hold up a mirror to you, listen to you as you're thinking through a decision, laugh with you as you said yes to something you really shouldn't have said, I didn't want to say yes to, is really powerful. So I think it's about holding up the mirror and being trusting people who are with you as you look into the mirror. I don't know, Lindsay, what would you want to add?
No, 100%. And that's been part of we said we started this work in this book was our journey, right? It was about doing this work for ourselves. And that's exactly it. The sort of, as you said, Kim, it is the, how have we raised our awareness, getting curious about, okay, why, and what is that? And
Right, right,
diving
right.
into it. But then exactly as Miriam said, sort of being, I don't know, normalizing it in a way of saying you're not alone, right? This sort of
Right,
the
right.
lifting up of the veil of experience, like it's this beautiful, I guess, ironic tension of like everybody's story is unique, and at the same time, the sharing of those unique stories, we see how interconnected
Oh,
and the patterns are, and we can be like, wait a second, right? Do we really want to keep reinforcing this either individually, this habit that I have, as Miriam said, but collectively, right? That we can then look
right.
sort of more systemically. both at our own internal habits, but also how do we maybe need to change policies and the way we structure things in organizations. And so I think that's something, again, the book is filled with, again, some of our stories, but also literally stories of women we've interviewed all over the world. And I think everybody we've talked to, it's like they can both, everybody has their unique story, and it's like at the same time you see yourself in everybody's story, and there's something so powerful about that, as like both noticing I'm not alone, I'm not crazy, that like it's true, like this is
Right.
and then exactly as Miriam said, we can hold up that mirror and be like, to your point, Kim, the socialization, the messages, like we can break the cycle. We can break the cycle for ourselves, and we can break the cycle if we want, different behaviors and different patterns. Then we need to start, that can start with a single yes and a single no, right? So,
Right, right, right. Well, I'm wondering too, the question for the dynamic duo here, because I'm thinking interviewing women all around the globe, obviously you're going to have cultural differences and some things were maybe different. It's sounding from the two of you that it was more similar than
yeah.
different. And I'm wondering if you like have sort of like a story, like a concrete, maybe business story. It doesn't have to be a business story. Any story that you found was sort of ubiquitous, throughout, like an actual example. Don't put you too much on the spot. I
Yeah,
just think,
no, I'm trying to think of a, because we have a variety, we call them ditty diaries. They're little sort of vignettes from people throughout the book. I think that there are some of the more ubiquitous stories, and see if Miriam, this resonates for you. Um, are in those stories of what you even said, Kim, of like picking up that invisible labor, whether that is physical labor or emotional labor, that that women especially hold. So that was sort of this story we just heard over and over again, both professionally and personally, of women sort of feeling like they had to be the solution to somebody, even sometimes if they were telling somebody no. So there was sometimes this tension that we heard over and over again of, even if we called it, and we had a word for it, we call it being the magic wand. So it's like, I'm going to say no, but I still have
totally.
to be the magic wand and like fix it for you, right? So, and so unpacking that sense of just because you don't have to do it, you also don't have to solve it for somebody else necessarily. So that was something that was really interesting. I thought that we heard stories over and over again of, again, that sense of I need to be, it's one of the disguises we talk about. I need to be the caped crusader. I need to be the superhero here
Oh,
to like
definitely.
fix it and do it for you. Miriam, I don't know, was there a story or one that popped up for you?
There wasn't a story that popped up per se, but I think what came up for me is that there is this simultaneous like conundrum for women is like in the doing and being realm of things. Like we're valued for all the things that we do, but there's also this way that we're expected to be in a way that is that creates this overwhelming fatigue because we're right meeting all the social expectations in terms of holding the invisible labor while saying yes to all the things that really might not be of service. And I think that regardless of the story itself, I felt like the stories had a bit of that common theme driving
Oh,
it. And I think again,
fantastic.
yeah. hmm
I just like I'm thinking of the whole motherhood. It's all rolling through my head. The whole
Yeah.
motherhood thing. And
hmm
when I look back, wow. And now I'm wondering how. And now obviously this is a big, huge question, a big, huge, you know,
Yeah.
sort of platform for change. Is the idea of rewriting, some of these old. I hesitate to say norms because they were only norms
Mhm.
for us, but rewriting some of these conditioned expectations on women, and where would we sort of start with that in your professional opinions?
I think it's, I don't know, Lindsay, if you're okay if I start in with
Yeah,
just this,
please do.
this
Yeah.
initial thought. Like what comes to mind initially is like, is first beginning to change our, the way we react to the narrative, the external narrative. And so again, bringing this idea of that, what we've been subjected to, putting it and making it the object of our attention so that we begin to, I love the language that you're bringing in here around authoring, that we become like our life isn't authored for us, but that we become the self-authoring in our own experience. And I think that would probably be, the first move is, I think, has to start internally,
Oh,
and just paying
definitely.
attention. Yeah, it's just really beginning to pay attention to, um, the patterns, right? Are just our patterns of behavior.
Right, right, right.
That'd be like, yeah. And in thinking about just work that we've done with clients and coaching, just like this recognition of, well, these triggers, that happen, like what are the circumstances in which I'm triggered to say habitually yes to this? What is the dynamic at play? Is it the people pleaser? Is it the self-doubting dame? Is it the, my perfectionism? What's really underlying this moment? And then
I
what's
have
happening
a
to me
different,
is,
I'm
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I
go
was just,
ahead.
I
No,
didn't
go
mean to
right
cut
ahead.
you off at all because I'm thinking of if you came across something you said, Miriam, sort of tripped my chord with this. If you had any women talking about all these different dynamics that we've been conditioned to do forever and
Mm.
involved, like when there's a power differential with maybe a male person, or did anybody talk about that at all? Like
Oh, I mean,
expectation.
it's
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I thought, I mean, I saw you sort of like going to start something. We definitely, I mean, that's part of the challenge in this sense of the delivering of a no, right? Like we talk a lot about the idea of both holding the reality that no is a complete sentence and I can deliver no, and this idea that we also talk about scaling our no, recognizing that no's have, yes, no can be a complete sentence and there's consequences. We can't ignore the fact that there's consequences, especially for women, to say no. Again, as we said, the research suggests that if we turn down an ask at work, we're seen as less favorable than if a man turns down an ask at work. And so we dive in. We heard lots of stories about that, of sensing that, like, but I can't say no, but I can't. And so we actually, again, from the stories we heard from the research, we talk a lot about how to scale your no. So yes, no can be a complete sentence, and how do you balance the what the ask is and the relationship that you're managing? And so exactly what you're saying, Kim, is sort of taking into consideration both the power differential, but also sometimes it's just a relationship. This is somebody I care about. It's my whatever, whether it's a coworker or a family member, right? And I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to upset them. So how can I match a no everywhere from maybe it is a no, but I do want to connect them up with another resource, or I do want to sort of help them to be like, I can't help you, but here's references, here's resources, here's another person you can contact, all the way up to like, no, and don't ever ask me again, right? I mean, depends on like what the ask is, and like, do you want them to come back and ask you anything? And so this idea of sort of, again, scaling your no, but there's also something, Kim, in that too, that we recognize. And again, yes, hearing stories of women that it's just we are not comfortable delivering even a simple no, even if actually there's not going to be that much of a ramification for it. We're just not comfortable with it because, again, the ingrained socialization of making other people happy, putting other people's needs before us. And so one of the many different practices we have in the book is doing things like nano knows, right? How can you sort of start practicing, like, in small ways, just like as in Minecraft, right? Building habits of mind. We don't have the muscles to say no and feel good
Right.
about it. So how can you start sort of, where is a place that you can practice that is you think is going to have less ramifications, so that you can build that confidence and even just the comfort with saying a no when it's uh more deliberate and maybe a bigger no that you want to deliver, right? So
Right.
sort of that, those starting with nano no's can be something that we work with. And another practice that I love that sort of gets at that, even thinking about with the power differential, but just in general, of getting comfortable with decision making, we talk about a lot, and this was a great thing we talked about with a lot of women, of trying on your yes and no, trying on your decision. So often we jump, we're like, or we think we have to say, respond right away. And actually, we talk about the power of the pause, right? How do you pause?
Yeah.
Give yourself time to even do this reflection. Is this something I want to do or not? But also to, like, we try on clothes to see if they fit us. Shouldn't we try on decisions to see if it's going to fit us too? And so actually sort of being like in your head and in your body, sort of trying on the, like, imagining that you're telling somebody yes, and then really, how does that feel, right? Like, does your stomach hurt? Right? Like listening to
Right.
yourself. And so, or imagining that you are telling somebody no, and what does that feel like? So sort of trying things on and living with them, even sort of embodying it, is so important, and listening to our intuition, because at the end of the day, we often know what we want to say yes and no to if we give ourselves time and space to do it.
Mm.
Oh, I love this. You have any comments, Miriam?
Yeah. I think that's just so beautiful. I mean, I think there's just this whole, I love this, everything that Lindsay shared. And I think, I come back to the decision tree, and I think in formal structures of organizations, part of the decision tree is there's the delight, but then there's this place, the next one is a duty. You might not want to do it, but you have to do it. It's part of your job requirement. It's part of your responsibility. We have them in our personal lives as well. And I think, sometimes in working with people, it's just that they didn't even know they could say no. And so part of it is like entering into things with a place of a clarity of agreement. Like, you have to know the structure within which you're living and or working, and just to help to be able to say get oriented before you answer yes or no. And I think those
Mm-hmm.
are important, footstones for people to pay attention to when they're finding themselves like just immediately responding to saying yes because they think they have to. But I think the scaling of the no, and I think the scaling of no is equally important, because relationships matter. And we're not encouraging people to go out and just say no, without thinking it through. Um, and the
Also important.
relationships. Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's the part of this is a yes.
Yes. Now I'm wondering, my brain is going to this place, which is probably a very organic place to leave our listeners with a tip. I know from a cognitive psychological standpoint, right, with any kind of shifting into, leaning into a new habit, that the brain is not that we are not lazy, of course, we are not lazy, but the brain is. The brain gets very stubborn and loves patterns, as you both know. So when we introduce a new thing, we are often met with a tantrum, like a 2 year old. And the brain will often resist, taking like a different hiking path when we're not used to it. So I'm curious about a twofold question for our listeners here. What is one small step? We kind of did that a little bit, but it's a great way to wrap up. One small step for listeners to get started with this, and then second part, when no, not it's not even if when they meet internal resistance, I mean ourselves.
Mm.
What might be some helpful internal dialogue to talk to herself to keep it going?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love
Mm-hmm.
that.
Inner
I,
cheerleader
I,
stuff.
yeah, the inner cheerleader. I would just say, I mean, Lindsay, I'm sure I'm assuming you might go here too, but just I would say the first gift that we can give ourselves is the pause, is a
Okay.
permission to pause. And when being faced with a request, whether it's a minute, 10 minutes, 24 hours, there is real power in the pause. And I think another thing that I think we really have come to value is getting really clear about what's essential to you. Because I think that becomes a bit of the North Star in helping you discern between the yes and the no. Lindsay, what would you
I
add to
I would
that?
completely echo that in terms of the
Hmm.
first smallest step in that, Kim, exactly, is that pot, like giving yourself that permission for the pause, because just as you said, it gives us the space to even recognize the pattern, right? To even sort of recognize, oh my gosh, like I just knee jerk feel like I should say yes to this, right? So even just, whether that is literally like getting yourself a little timer or whatever you need to do to just giving yourself the permission of literally starting with a 5 minute pause, to if you can give yourself, oh my gosh, a day pause on something, that is such a powerful small action. Exactly as you said, Kim, to sort of help us to even just tap into that awareness of shifting our to first of all, to be aware of our habit, right? To become aware of the habit. And then as some of the things, yeah, that we talked about, of the starting to play with, as you said, as we're developing a habit or shifting our habit, giving ourselves permission to do that in baby steps is fine, like the no, right? To, like, it doesn't have to be, I have to go tell my boss tomorrow. Like, no, right? It can be like, like you said, maybe I'm not setting the table at Thanksgiving this year, or whatever. Like what is the no I can start with? And I love that question. Then exactly, what is the narrative as we can tell ourselves? I think that I think one of the biggest things we can come back to, it links to the essentials of, it always comes to me back to sort of self-love, right? I mean, it's sort of, at the end of the day, it is, and we talk about this in our book, sort of this loving, like, holding all of this, with loving irreverence. But there is, how can we be kind to ourselves, and even recognizing if it's like, oh shoot, I should have said no to that and I said yes. It's like, well, that's a good learning for you. So next time, let's pause for 10 minutes instead of, right? And so I think there's this kindness and self-love that we have to do, because it is a journey, as you said, like any sort of shifting of habit, and sort of, we are literally building new synaptic connections in our mind that, depending on our age, have been decades, that have
Yes.
been reinforced over and over and
Mm.
over again. And so, of course, it's not going to change overnight, but I love your metaphor of like hiking, but it's totally worth sort of stepping through the brambles. And sometimes we are going to get, you are going to, get some scrapes and stuff along the way, but you're sort of forging your new path. And again, along the way, being kind to yourself. And as Miriam said, as much as you can then also, find those other people in your life to be that mirror and that loving sort of space for you, to be like, I need to talk this through. Can you help me? Is such a gift that we can give ourselves, I think.
I
Oh, definitely.
100%. I think the only thing I would add on to that, Lens, is what I think you're the queen of, and so I'll just bow to you here. Is the invitation to be really curious. I think when we get in this reactive state and we start to judge ourselves, that's when the shutdown happens. So if we can meet it with a very open, possibilizing question. I mean, happen to love Benjamin Zander's, like, how fascinating when we do something that we've done all along, that if we can hold it lightly. I think that's where we begin to create some more space to create the changes we want. But that place of curiosity, which Lindsay's been so um, lovely and gifting us with over and over again.
Oh,
Um,
thank you, Miriam.
mhm.
I think that's her inner appreciative inquirer. That's what
Oh,
I would
I think
say.
It's
so
in there.
too.
It's in there.
It's
She's an
real.
inquirer. She's a ditty ditcher. I am working to be multifaceted here, ladies. So
And the possibilitizer too. So this is fantastic. So the wrap up there is, I mean, I think we can probably agree that it all comes down to self love and self worth. I mean, everything we
Hmm.
do, really, relationships, the whole thing, and also the sort of finding our people in the
yeah.
workplace, or outside the workplace, seeking out other women maybe to
Hmm.
relate to and to gain strength and be sounding boards for, hey, I gotta have a talk with the boss in 2 hours, can I throw it at you first? If I'm
Right.
gonna give them an enlightened no, or an empowered yes, one or the other.
Yes,
And then,
exactly. I love it.
and then the
Yeah.
curiosity and really sort of just say no to self-criticism. And that's a great way to wrap it up. So any ending comments from either one of you for our listeners?
Oh, heavens. I think the one thing I would say is that this was a total delight. So, on the top of the tree from the fullness of my heart, thank you for this, Ken. This was great.
Exactly. That's what we're always witching. Why are we ditching ditties? It's because we want space for more delight in our life. So
Oh,
whatever
good.
we can do for ourselves and for others to do that is really the best gift we can give ourselves and the world today, I think.
Oh, you are singing my tune, both of you, because I'm all about the our most valuable life minutes. And whenever we can rescue some of these valuable life minutes from their demise and
Mm.
something we don't want to be doing or doesn't feel good or whatever, yay! So I think this is fantastic. So I would like to let our listeners know before we sign off here that you will be able to reach out to Lindsey and Miriam. Their information will be right underneath here in the blurb. Strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to read Ditch the Ditty, Doing What Matters Instead of Doing It All. Best-selling book by the dynamic duo here. And there's the third author, Molly, right? So
Yes. Yep.
uh, please feel free to reach out, and if want them to come speak, or you want to have any other further conversations, and that will be it. So thank you so much, Lindsey and Miriam, for sharing your life minutes on this day, because there is no greater compliment, and also for the listeners. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.